Welkom bij het webinar wat vandaag zal gaan over project- en procesmanagement met Omnia en Microsoft 365. Mijn naam is Erik Bolten. Ik ben accountmanager bij C-Solutions en ik zal jullie vandaag meenemen gedurende dit webinar. Hierbij zien jullie de agenda voor vandaag. We doen eerst straks een korte introductie. Daarna een stuk over het visualiseren en het beschrijven van processen. Het managen van zakelijke documenten op een kwaliteitsgegarandeerde manier. Hoe zorg je dat projecten effectiever gedaan worden? En tot slot sluiten we af met de Q&A-sessie. Ik wil jullie allemaal vragen om, als jullie vragen hebben, om die te stellen via de chat. Dan gaan we die op het einde beantwoorden. We doen dit webinar samen met Omnia. Zoals ik al zei, mijn naam is Erik Bolten. Ik ben accountmanager bij C-Solutions en werk er nu ruim 2 jaar. Anders, can I give you some time to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Eric. My name is Anders Fagerlund. I'm based in Gothenburg, Sweden, and I work for Omnia. I have done so for quite many years, and my role is focused on our offering around the product Omnia, and also then helping customers to map the products compared to their requirements and needs.
Okay, thank you, Anders. Anders will take over the screen in a few minutes and do the rest of the presentation and demo in English. Ik zal nog eventjes doorgaan in het Nederlands, ook al zijn mijn slides wel in het Engels. Ik wil nog heel kort eventjes C-Solutions introduceren voor de mensen die ons nog niet kennen. Wij zijn een Microsoft partner, gevestigd in Bunnik. En wij richten ons erop om organisaties en met name de mensen binnen organisaties met elkaar te verbinden. Mensen op een goede en effectieve manier met elkaar te laten samenwerken. Waardoor mensen eigenlijk altijd op elk device over de juiste informatie kunnen beschikken. En dus met elkaar effectief kunnen samenwerken. Nou, dat kan zijn vergaderen, dat kan zijn chatten, maar dat kan ook zeker zijn het gemeenschappelijk werken in documenten. Zoals ik al zei, wij zijn een Microsoft partner, maar we hebben ook een partnership met Omnia. Omnia is een product wat zich met name richt op intranet, kwaliteitsmanagement, document management en is een add-on eigenlijk bovenop Microsoft 365 en werkt daar naadloos mee samen. Goed, Anders, you can take over the screen and continue with your part of the presentation.
Okay, thanks very much for inviting me to this webinar. Today we will show some features and capabilities in Omnia to help your organization to implement a recommended way of working. And I would like to begin here by asking the question, can you remember any purchase that you have made that has gone wrong? That might have been you bought a sofa that was defect on delivery, you bought a refrigerator that was too noisy, poor quality sneakers, or maybe you were in a restaurant and were served the wrong food. So I would say that most people can recall some bad purchases. We have bought something that didn't live up to expectations. And I mean, this is, of course, really cumbersome for an organization to handle any mishaps and poor deliveries. So that is something that we will address today. So, I mean, if you think about the question how to best avoid customer complaints, I read quite a funny conversation regarding this, since someone actually proposed that one way of minimizing customer complaints would be to shut down the customer service or customer call center, or don't having that kind of forms on the website and so forth. That is obviously not the best way to avoid customer complaints, but instead, I mean, the best way here is, of course, to prevent any issues with services and products before they happen. So, and I would say that this is why we need this best practice way of working. This is why we need defined processes, clear instructions, and a sound implementation of that. The purpose is mainly to support all employees in getting it right the first time. So what we will talk about today is based on this quite simple model in 4 steps. We will discuss step 1 and 2 today. I think that's all we have time for. So we will have a look at how we can define a best practice, how we can define this recommended way of working and get that out to employees. So that will of course be focused on processes and steering documents. We will also have a look at step 2, where we will see how we can make processes runnable, how we can implement our models in our organization, and also how we can use training to help employees, of course, then stick to this recommended way of working. So we're going to talk about the step 1 and 2 here. Today we will not have time to go into continuous improvements and how to measure and evaluate our business, but maybe we can talk more about that at some other point. So let's start then with the first section here, our way of working. So first of all, then I would say that when we talk about defining our way of working, our recommended way of working, I would say that we should start here. Most businesses are process oriented, and we need to define these processes and visualize them for our employees. And I mean, what we're looking at here in I would say any organization is that we have a main process with a number of sub processes. So we need to sort of not only define a main process, but also look into the sub processes. And when, I mean, the processes here will work as a clickable navigation. It will describe how our organization, how our business is made up, and we can, on any level, any chosen level, have a process map, and we can have related information that will be good for the employee to take part of, to be able to follow the recommended way of working. So how can we do that then? Well, Omnia is a product that is installed together with Microsoft 365. We are now looking at an interface for a process owner. So what we have done here is we have activated the capability to define processes. And you can see here that I have already then defined a process for how we work with developing new products. You can see that we have a number of steps here, and you can see the same steps in the layout here. So if I wanted to add new steps to the process, I can add steps or shapes here. So what I would do here as a next step would of course be to choose, well, maybe another activity or a decision point or whatever shape that I'm looking for here, and add that to the map and start describing that activity. And I can do that then in the tabs that we see here. So we have the description of the process or of a certain activity. But as you see, I can also add documents. Steering documents would be the obvious choice here, like handbooks and checklists and instructions. But I can also add tools, or I can specify a list of tasks. So when working in this phase, maybe you have 5 or 10 or 15 mandatory tasks that you need to carry out to perform the activity in a correct way. So as you can see here, we can sort of define and describe the process in the process image, but also then in writing here and in documents, in tasks, in tools, and so forth. So when we have done that, we need to handle processes in a controlled way. So what I'm doing here is that I'm publishing this new edition of the process that we just did. So I work with a draft process, and when we are ready to go live, we can publish that via an approval workflow, and then the process will be live and available for our colleagues. So as I said, we can add documents to the process, and these should also, of course, then be handled in a quality assured way. So in this case, we are going to work in the Microsoft Teams environment. Before, as you saw, we were accessing the solution in our web browser. So that is more or less in the Microsoft 365 and SharePoint context. But just to show you also that the same activities here can be carried out in Teams. So I could work with defining the processes in Teams if I choose to do that. But what we're going to do now is we are here in the team product development. So that is my department. And what we're going to do now is go into the tab controlled documents. So this is where I create documents. This is where I work with draft documents. So you can see we are presently in the view drafts. And when we have created a new document and we have sent that for approval, when it's approved, it will turn up here among approved, or in this case, published documents. So what I can do here is I can create a new document, and that I do based on document types that we have defined in the solution. So here I can see some of the document types available, and I can make my choice there. In this case, we are going to do a work instruction. I have also selected a template that is also handled within the system. In this case, we're going to do a guideline document about ideation. So I'm also asked here to provide some properties on the document, a document owner and an organization in this case. And then I create the document, and as you can see, this is just sort of working in Microsoft Word and working with the document as you would do in sort of any case here. We are still sort of working through the Teams context, but when writing the document, we will probably do that in Word. What you can see here also is in the template, we have a set document header, and you can see here that we have some strings here. These strings will be replaced by the document properties as we approve the document. So here we are then, we are still in the draft view. We are working with the ideation guidelines here. And now when we have, completed the document or are almost complete with the document, we can use two workflows here. One is to send the document for comments or feedback from some colleagues, and the other one is the publishing or approval workflow. So here I'm asking two colleagues to provide feedback on the document, so that will probably be the first step. And then I will, after some changes, perhaps send the document for approval. And when the document has been approved, we can send notifications to people who are who should be sort of notified on that we have a new document or we have a new version of a document. And in this case, I'm also asking for a read receipt. So here we have the document now. It's been approved and published. So here we have it in edition 1. It has gotten an ID number here, as you can see. And this is a work instruction. So we are still in the Teams context, but what we can do here now is then connect this document to the process that we looked at. So let's have a look at what this would look like for an end user. An end user now then accessing the business processes. So the end user arrives at the start page of our intranet. We have a section up here called How We Work. And when I access that mega menu, you can see that we have some processes available here. So in this case, in this demo scenario, there are several subsidiaries here, but we have published the process and the document to this organization. So let's go into the Alameda Bikes company. So this is the main process. This is sort of the top level description of what the employees actually carry out on a daily basis in this organization. So we have sort of the core processes here with developing products, marketing products, selling, purchasing, producing, supplying, and so forth. And we have some supporting processes here as well. Now this can work, as I said, as a clickable navigation. So I can here dive into the develop products process and go even one step further to see the process. This is the process that we saw in the sort of edit interface before. So what we have here then are, of course, the process steps, the description of the process and the various steps, and we have some related content here to the right. I can also then navigate even further and go into sort of the first step here. And I can also, of course, open up the accordions out here to see the related information. Now you remember that document that we produced based on, we were working in Microsoft Teams, that was the ideation guidelines. So what we did here then is that we said that this document belongs to this activity. So we have a control document where we know that we have a quality assured way of working with that document. And we have a quality assured way of working with the process. Everything here is sort of traceable. We have the history, we have the appropriate workflows and so forth. So this is, of course, a good way then when we talk about implementing a recommended way of working, define the processes, make sure that you have steering documents handled in the quality assured way, and make sure to publish documents to activities in the selected processes. Now, as I said in the beginning, we will also look at how we then can implement this recommended way of working, because I mean, it's one thing to describe it and make it available within your intranet. It's a totally different thing to make sure that people actually work in this way. So we need to make sure by training and by implementing the way of working into the organization that this actually is the case. So let's have a look at that. Now, first of all, I would say that it's getting more and more common to provide learning resources within an intranet. And in this case, you can see that we have a learning center here. So this is a way to provide and present learning resources for an employee. So here we have courses, and this can be instructor-led courses internally, or for that it can be self-service courses. And here I can narrow down the scope of training by saying that, okay, I would like to see product-related training that is self-service, and then we have narrowed the scope. So here you can see we were before defining the envisioning activity within developing products. And here you can see we have a course about that activity. So this is, of course, a way to learn about how to work with the envisioning activity. So what we have here then is a micro course that can be taken self-service. So I just start the course whenever I want to and have the time. It's based on 6 steps. It will take me approximately 25 minutes. We are in the second step, and as you can see here, we can mix text and images. We can also apply videos in this context to add to the course. So what we can do here then is sort of present the way we want people to work in that activity. And this course should, of course, also then be available in the process context. What we also can do here is add a lightweight knowledge check. So in this case, it's just 3 questions to make sure that the person who took the course have understood what the course was about, more or less. It's not anything that you use for certifications, but just a lightweight knowledge check. In this case, we have a video course. So here you can see that we have the video course Bike Maintenance Crash Course. And this is also then something that can be provided in the Learning Center. This could, of course, be a recording of a Teams meeting, someone presenting the new guidelines for sales, or presenting our marketing activities, or presenting how to work in the envisioning phase in a product development project. Now, let's have a look at sort of the other side of that coin, because one thing we can do here is, of course, that, as you saw, we can provide learning resources. But the other thing we can do here is we can actually take out the process that we just defined and create a template of that process to make sure that when we collaborate, when we work in a project, that we actually follow that process quite strictly. So let's move behind the scenes first of all. Here you can see that I'm working with setting up templates. So in this case, we will pick out that process that we just defined. We will create a template where we can sort of connect the template to that process and see what happens. So here I'm building a project template, and you can see that we have some steps to define here. So what I want here is to add some properties like here. So we should have certain properties on our projects. In this case, we want it to be a Microsoft Teams template. In this case, I also want to set up some channels and some additional tabs within the Microsoft Teams context. And as you can see here, we have even implemented some rules regarding how to name projects. These are, of course, examples. There are plenty more under the hood, but what's important here is that we can sort of make choices regarding how we want the process model to be sort of implemented into the project. So let's try this out. And what we're going to do here is we're going to go back into Teams and we're going to create a new project. So the first thing that I'll do here is I'll choose that project template that you saw that we created. In the next step, we have to add some information about the project. This is then regulated on decisions that we have made in the template. We have to add some properties that we decided that we need to have on projects. And one of the properties here is to connect this project to a certain process model. This is the model that we looked at before, develop product. And then I can invite people to the project. And before I create it, I can just double check the information that I've inputted here. So then we create the project, and in this case, we created the project Iceman. You can see that we have 2 channels here. We could have set up 3 or 4 channels if we wanted that. This is just to show you that we can sort of decide on what channels a project should have. And you can also see that we have some additional tabs here, also then based on the template. So We're now going to take that template, move over to the project Iceman and have a look at how this could turn out. So as you can see, we are going to have a look at the 4 additional tabs here that you wouldn't see in Microsoft Teams if you just created based on the Microsoft Teams template. So here you can see the model again. Now it's white, however, and that is then due to the fact that this is our instance of that process. So what I can do here then is I can work with showing progress in the model. I can also work with assigning tasks and creating documents based on templates. So let's start with the tasks, where we can mark tasks from the process, from the template, and assign those to our board of activities. So in this case, I will assign 2 tasks, and these will be added to this bucket. This is then a Microsoft Planner board. So here we have added some information about who is responsible. The activities are ongoing here. We have added some end and start dates and a couple of labels here. And when we go back to the project model, you can see that this information has now been transferred over here. So this can also then work as an overview of sort of how many of the tasks within a certain phase here have we actually completed. What we also can do is work with the steering documents. So the steering documents can be provided in this way, just to sort of take part of and read up on certain guidelines, for instance. But these could also be templates. And when using template documents here, then you recognize that we're back in this sort of create document wizard with the document type, template, the properties. I can create the document. And what you can see here now is that we have moved over to the deliverables tab, because in this case, we decided that any deliverable created within the project should be handled as a controlled document. So this document is also then up for being handled via approval workflows. So in this case, we approve the Tollgate 1 project report. And when I've done that, you can see that it's now available then in the Publish tab here instead. You can also see that there are plenty of features available for document management here that you wouldn't meet in SharePoint. So if you have questions regarding that, we can definitely take a deep dive into that at some point. So I also said we can monitor progress here. So what we can do is we can say that certain phases here are set a status for those. So in this case, yellow means that we are working in this activity presently. But once we move ahead, we can also then state that these 2 phases are completed. We're working here now, and then sort of carry on to describe the progress here. And this can, of course, be available not only for project members, but perhaps also for a reference group or a steering committee or whatever stakeholders you might have regarding projects. So the final tab here is regarding project info. And what we have here is a page that we edit within the Teams context about our project. We have the project information, the properties here, and we have a document here. So this is information that is actually available for anyone in the organization. And just to show you very quickly, let's move over to a live environment here. So this is the intranet that we have been looking at. And what we have here then is a project center. So let's go into that. So what we have here in the project center is, first of all, the project model. So this is the project model that we have been working with today. If we go back to the start page, you can see that we have a tab here for any ongoing projects, the current projects. So this is a project portfolio of any ongoing project. And below here, we have the project Iceman. So the page that I just showed you that we were editing within the Teams interface is available here for, well, in this case, any employee that has access to the project center. We can also find project documents here. So any of the deliverables that you saw me working with before actually turns up here. So if we want to share deliverables from projects in this way, it's quite easy to do since we're handling the documents in this quality assured way. So let's go back to the presentation again. So just a summary here. We looked at this model here, the 4 steps when implementing this recommended way of working. We have today talked about how to sort of define and launch that recommended way of working with the defining processes, with the steering documents and making that information available for end users, but also then how we can provide learning resources and how we can make sure that to create templates for collaboration in teams based on our processes. So with that, we have looked at the content that I have prepared. So back to you, Eric, and perhaps you would like to check if we have any questions.
Yes, Anders, very much. I think it was a very clear presentation, and I hope that the people that have visited webinar, that it is a great help to them. So we did receive a few questions. So the first question, Anders, that I received is, how much time would it roughly take for, let's say, one process? Very much. I think it was to automate it in this tool.
Well, I mean, to describe a process, to define a process, it of course depends on the complexity of the process, but I would say that if you work a half day, 3-4 hours, you can probably set up pretty complex processes, and also then add documents and add content descriptions and tools and so forth. So it's not that time consuming at all, and it's a simple interface. So I wouldn't expect anyone to having to spend too much time on defining processes.
Okay, thank you. I think it's a very clear answer. Another question that I personally have, in the past, we would see that, let's say, when a company would ask for, let's say, tooling like this, that the questions would come from IT. How do you see that nowadays? Where do you see the question arise for, being able to handle these processes now?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because I think that what we see today and what we have seen for a couple of years is that the question is more often asked from the business side, not the IT side in general. And when we talk about areas like process visualization, document management, or driving efficient projects, I would say that companies that have some kind of quality and environment function, these people often ask about this. If you have like a project office internally, that could also be the case regarding the project part of it. And I would also say that even from communications, actually, we can see this, since communications functions are often responsible for the intranet, and then they get the question internally and they go out to sort of pop that question to a vendor. So not as common at all that we get the question from sort of an IT person, even though IT are always involved in the process, but maybe not asking the question.
Okay, yeah, that's something that I expected you to answer. I mean, that's a trend that I see also, that when it becomes to tooling like this, we see more questions coming from, let's say, HR or finance, or so, yeah, more from a business side, and that IT supports a lot of these questions. Okay, I've received a last question, and it is about what defines the success when implementing a tool like this. I mean, can you give some tips and tricks to when it comes to successful projects?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that the main part here is to make sure that people actually work according to this recommended way. It is not that difficult to define processes and to describe processes. It's not that difficult to publish those processes, make the information available, but to get people to actually work in the recommended way, that is definitely a challenge. So I would say that the common pitfall here is to sort of persuade employees and make them understand that there is a recommended way of working for a reason, and also then to help them follow that, based perhaps on training, but also based on the sort of project templates. So if that is applicable, that's a good way to make sure that people work according to the recommended way.
Yeah. So adoption is a very important thing when a company wants to do a project like this, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
If you're unsuccessful with driving adoption, then this will not be a success. If you are able to drive adoption and have reasonably high adoption over time, this will definitely contribute to your organization and business.
Okay. This was the final question that we received. So, Anders, I would like to thank you very much for your clear presentation. I will now switch over to Dutch for the last few words of this webinar. Ik wil iedereen graag bedanken voor het bijwonen van dit webinar. Dit webinar is terug te zien op onze website. En verder willen we graag zorgen dat we onze webinars continu kunnen verbeteren. Dus ik wil jullie graag vragen om, als jullie opmerkingen hebben, dan kunnen jullie reageren via deze code op het scherm. En jullie kunnen mij ook altijd benaderen via de website of via de mail. Ook die informatie is allemaal beschikbaar op onze website. Dus bij deze hartelijk dank voor het bijwonen en hopelijk tot een volgend webinar. Hartelijk bedankt.